If someone would throw out a bike, what else would they throw out? So that's why I started digging in the garbage constantly. Even if it wasn't a big garbage day, I was always in the trash cans and stuff.
He was holding his best friend's hand when the breathing stopped. No cameras. No crew. No white van parked outside. Just Mike Wolfe, sitting in a quiet room in Iowa, beside a man he hadn't truly spoken to in years, a man he had laughed with across 500,000 miles of American backroads, watching him take his last breath. And the question that lingered afterward wasn't really about Frank Fritz. It was about Mike. Because something had shifted in the weeks and months that followed. You could see it in the way he chose his words. The pauses that came too early. The careful phrasing of a man who had rehearsed what he wanted to say, then abandoned the rehearsal halfway through. There was a heaviness in him, not the clean kind that grief eventually lifts, but the deeper, stickier kind. The kind that comes from standing at the edge of something you almost missed entirely. That's a different weight. And most people who've carried it know exactly what it feels like. Mike Wolfe turned 61 without ceremony. No retrospective. No television tribute. No grand reflection delivered to a studio audience. Just a man sitting quietly among the objects he had spent a lifetime collecting, vintage bicycles propped in corners, worn signs leaning against walls, the beautiful debris of other people's discarded lives, and for maybe the first time, turning that same searching gaze inward. What he found there wasn't comfortable. He said turning 60 had centered him. That his circle was shrinking, and that this felt like progress. That he was finally learning to be present, actually present, with the people who mattered most. But the word centered is doing a lot of work in that sentence. It implies there was a time when he wasn't. And that gap, between who he was in motion and who he became when the motion stopped, is where the real story lives. To understand the man at 61, you have to go back further than the show. Further than the fame, the brand, the carefully lit shots of him pulling something remarkable from somebody's collapsed barn. You have to go back to Bettendorf, Iowa. A single mother. 2 siblings. A father who wasn't in the picture. Mike Wolfe grew up in the particular quiet of a house where things didn't get explained, they just were, and you adapted. Children raised in that kind of environment develop a specific skill. They learn to read rooms. To sense the temperature of things before anyone speaks. To find stability in objects when people feel uncertain. He was 6 years old when he dug his first bicycle out of a neighbor's trash. He didn't keep it. He fixed it up, whatever a 6-year-old can fix, and sold it. Then he went looking for the next one. And the next. A pattern established before he was old enough to understand what a pattern was. There's something in that image that resists simple interpretation. A small boy, alone in an alley, rescuing something that had been left behind. Not for sentiment. Not to keep. To restore, and release. To find value where someone else saw none, and move on. He would spend the next 5 decades doing exactly that. Whether he ever noticed that he applied the same logic to people, found them, restored them, moved on, is a question that nobody has asked him directly. But the evidence has a quiet way of arranging itself. He met Jody Faith in 1994. He was nobody then, in the technical sense. No television deal, no national profile, no mythology attached to his name. Just a young man from Iowa who was obsessed with old things and had a dream he couldn't quite articulate yet, something about a van, and a road, and all the hidden history sitting uncollected in the country's forgotten places. Jody believed in that dream before it had a shape. They dated for 18 years before he proposed. 18 years is a long time to wait for a signal. It isn't. Charlie arrived with a cleft lip and cleft palate. Feeding was immediately difficult. She lost weight in those first fragile days. 2 surgeries came in the first year, each one carrying its own particular fear, the kind that parents absorb silently and carry longer than they admit. Jodi held her through most of it. Mike was on the road. The show was accelerating. American Pickers was becoming a phenomenon. Millions of viewers tuning in each week to watch two men drive across America and find beauty in what everyone else had overlooked. It was, on its surface, a deeply charming premise. A kind of secular gospel: nothing is truly worthless, if you know how to look. Back home in Tennessee, Jodi was learning a different version of that lesson. She had stopped working when Charlie was born. The travel, the surgeries, the daily management of a child with medical complexity, it absorbed everything. She was building stability in the background of a life that was, for public consumption, one man's adventure story. And then, in 2013, she was diagnosed. Stage 2 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. She wrote about it later with a particular kind of honesty. She was vegan. She exercised. She juiced. She had done everything that was supposed to protect a person. And then, she said, just the word, like punctuation, bam. Mike was there through the treatment. That's documented. He showed up in the way that matters during illness, physically present, consistent, reliable. By 2014, the cancer was in remission. A genuine miracle dressed in ordinary clothes. And life, somehow, resumed. By May 2020, he posted about it publicly. 6 years cancer-free. A photo of Jodi and Charlie, soft and warm, the kind of image that looks like an exhale. By June, they had separated. Nobody ever explained what happened in those weeks between the post and the filing. No statement addressed it. No interview walked backward through it. The court documents were careful and bloodless, irreconcilable differences. 18 years of waiting. 8 years of marriage. A child with medical needs. A cancer diagnosis survived together. And then, quietly, without public drama, it ended. What accumulates in a relationship over that kind of time doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive as a single fracture. It arrives as a slow adjustment to distance. A tolerance for absence that eventually becomes its own kind of presence. Two people who have learned to function around each other rather than with each other, until one day someone looks up and realizes the gap has become the architecture. Jodi never pointed to a cause. She conducted herself with a steadiness that was almost architectural, solid, deliberate, facing forward. She took Charlie. She took the Nashville home, the North Carolina property, more than $5 million in assets. She returned, quietly, to the accounting career she had set aside a decade earlier. Numbers that look, on paper, like a settlement. That feel, if you sit with them, like a kind of accounting for time. For years spent holding everything together in the spaces between someone else's motion. She never gave an interview. Never offered a narrative. Just moved forward, in private, with her daughter. There's a specific kind of dignity in that. And a specific kind of loneliness that it conceals. Almost immediately, Letitia Klein appeared in Mike's public life. She was younger. Visually striking. Comfortable in front of a camera. Everything that Jodi, by temperament and by choice, was not. The audience noticed. They always do. The comments under his posts turned sharper. People who had watched Mike Wolfe for 15 years, who had built a comfortable idea of who he was, felt the dissonance of it. Not quite betrayal. More like the sensation of a familiar story shifting genre without warning. And Frank Fritz was already gone by then. He had left American Pickers in 2020, the same year the marriage ended. The exit wasn't clean. There was a back injury. Frank talked about it. He didn't soften it. He said Mike hadn't called in over 2 years. That he didn't believe the Instagram post Mike wrote, that someone else had composed it for him, he suspected. That in 10 years, he couldn't recall 5 genuinely kind words spoken between them outside of a shared laugh at someone else's expense. Hard words. Delivered without performance. Mike said nothing publicly in response. That silence, the public one, following years of private silence, is itself a kind of answer. Not a dishonest one. More like the answer of a man who processes inward, who withdraws when confronted with emotional complexity, who maybe doesn't have a clean explanation because the behavior wasn't clean. It was just human. Avoidant in the specific way that people who were never given a language for emotional difficulty tend to be avoidant, not from malice, but from a kind of practiced incompetence in sitting still with pain. Frank had a stroke in 2022. Ended up in a nursing home. The man who had driven across America with Mike Wolfe for a decade, laughing, bickering, finding treasure in rusted heaps, was now largely absent from the world. Not gone yet. But going. And the show kept moving. The call came in late September 2024. Frank wasn't doing well. Mike got in his car. He drove to Iowa. To the room where his oldest friend was lying still, the way people lie still near the end, not asleep, not peaceful, but somewhere between. He has described what happened next in language that's been carefully chosen and gently held. He said he arrived about an hour before Frank passed. That he held his hand. Rubbed his chest. Spoke to him. He told Frank he wasn't angry with him. He said he loved him. That he cared for him deeply. When Frank's breathing faltered, Mike asked him to go find his mother, who had died before him. And when it was over, he reached out and closed Frank's eyes with his fingers. "I'm not mad at you." That's not the phrase of an uncomplicated friendship. It doesn't exist in relationships that were always easy. It exists in the specific space of long love complicated by long silence, where the most pressing thing, in the final moment, is not the grief, but the clearing of something accumulated. Anger. Absence. The weight of all the calls that never came. Mike cleared it. Just in time. And then he was standing outside that room, carrying something new. Grief, yes. But also the particular aftermath of repair that arrives too late for anything except itself. He spoke about their friendship afterward with more honesty than he usually permits himself in public. He said they had always loved each other. That the distance had been real, he didn't deny it. But that the love had been real too, running underneath the silence the whole time. He said he had pushed for Frank to enter rehab. Standing at a distance while someone he loved was suffering wasn't something he was capable of. That he had stepped in, even when it was uncomfortable, even when the situation resisted clean resolution. That detail matters. It doesn't erase the years of silence. It doesn't answer Frank's version of events, which was sharper and more accusing. But it complicates the simple story, the one where Mike Wolfe discarded his friend the same way he discarded people he'd used up. It suggests something messier and more human. Two men who genuinely loved each other and were also genuinely bad at maintaining what they had, in the specific way that people who bond around shared motion tend to struggle when the motion stops. The reconciliation came. It just didn't come with time left for a second chapter. Only for a goodbye. That distinction is the kind that echoes. There's something Mike said about turning 60 that doesn't register as television personality language. He said his circle was shrinking. And that this felt like a gift. Most people his age mourn a shrinking circle. They speak about lost connection, reduced relevance, the quiet terror of becoming peripheral. Mike framed it as relief. As clarity. As the condition necessary for him to finally be present, a word he returned to more than once. Which raises something uncomfortable, present where, exactly, had he not been? At home, while the cameras were rolling somewhere else. In the marriage, while the road kept calling. With Frank, while the silence stretched into years. With Charlie, while she was growing up mostly in her mother's care and his scheduled visits. The shrinking circle isn't just loss. It's also the aftermath of choices that were made quietly, over time, without ever being framed as choices at all. Charlie is 13 now. She lives with Jody. Mike pays child support. He's involved. Deliberately, intentionally, in the scheduled way that separated fathers learn to show up when the ambient daily presence is no longer possible. Whether that's enough isn't a question this script can answer. It isn't a question any adult can answer for another. Only Charlie will know, in time, what it felt like to have a father who was famous for finding hidden value in overlooked things, and what it meant to grow up as one of the things he circled back to. In September 2025, Letitia was in the car when it happened. A crash in Tennessee. Mike hit the steering wheel hard enough to break it. Fractured nose. Stitches in his face. Heavy bruising. Letitia was hospitalized longer. She said afterward that he was extraordinarily lucky, that the steering column had nearly impaled him. That the margin between what happened and something much worse was almost nothing at all. He was released the next day. She stayed. There is something quietly significant about that image, Mike Wolfe walking out of a hospital in the same year he stood at the bedside of a man who didn't walk out of anything. Surviving a wreck that shouldn't have been survivable, in a year already heavy with loss. The kind of year that forces even the most forward-facing person to stop. To turn around. To look at what they've been driving away from. He posted a photo on New Year's Eve, 2024. Himself, sitting on a couch. Vintage bikes leaning behind him. White t-shirt, blue jeans, looking off to the side. Not performing happiness. Something quieter than that. He wrote that this image was where he was in his life. Happy. Content. Excited about the future. He mentioned loss. He mentioned heartache. He acknowledged both without dwelling on either. He said his projects had inspired him to do more. He thanked his daughter. He thanked his family. He ended with a kind of declaration, 2025. We got this. There's a particular psychology to that kind of statement. It's not denial, it's too honest for denial. It's more like the decision a person makes after the worst of something has passed, to face forward anyway. To name the grief and then name, separately, the intention to continue. Not because the grief is over. But because the forward direction is a choice that has to be made consciously, or it won't be made at all. Mike Wolfe has spent his entire adult life finding things other people left behind. Finding value in the discarded and the overlooked. Believing, in some essential way, that the things that were abandoned weren't beyond recovery. He built a career on that belief. A television show. A brand. A public identity. The harder, quieter question, the one that turned 61 with him, is whether he applies the same faith to the parts of his own life that got set down along the way. Whether a man who rescues objects understands that the same patience, the same deliberate care, the same willingness to slow down and look closely, applies to people too. To the ones who waited. To the ones who didn't make it. To the daughter growing up with a father who's learning, maybe for the first time, how to stay in one place long enough for it to matter. He's still driving. Still picking. Still finding something worth keeping in the places everyone else passed without stopping. But something in the way he talks about it now sounds different. Like he's not just searching for what's out there anymore. Like he's starting to understand what he left behind. And you can hear it, if you listen carefully. In the pauses. The ones that come just before he speaks. The ones that hold something he hasn't quite found the words for yet.